activist.
And has there been a sighting of Jay Slater? Tenerife locals say they've seen the missing teenager, missing for 11 days, celebrating while watching the Euros. We'll have the latest.
So Robert Blackstock, who asked that question?
He's coming
on.
on.
We're going to talk to him
We're
this
going to
morning.
talk to him because I think, Bev, he spoke for so many people, because I just think we've got two of the worst potential well, we know who's going to be Prime Minister. It's going to be Starmer, but they're just not great, are they?
Absolutely. And Robert said he thought that Keir Starmer was having his strings pulled by people higher up in the Labour Party, so I'm dying to ask him who he meant by that. Get in touch with us
Tony
this morning.
Blair, maybe?
GBNews.com/your say. First, though, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Andrew, Bev, thank you and good morning. The top stories. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer returned to the campaign trail today after they clashed over illegal immigration and the betting row in a television debate last night, with just a week before voters go to the polls. The Labour leader accused the Prime Minister of being bullied into taking action in the betting scandal, while Mr Sunak repeatedly warned voters not to surrender to Labour's tax and migration plans. The pair also answered questions from an invited studio audience, with one asking how either leader was planning to control illegal immigration.
The Rwandan plan is a deterrent. You just have to listen to what the illegal migrants themselves are saying. One of them just said, most of us are still in France due to the fear we have about Rwanda. Another one said, I won't cross the channel until the Rwanda plan is destroyed. If Labour win, the people smugglers are going to need a bigger boat. Don't surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
Record numbers coming across the channel, and he says it's a deterrent. There are a few hundred that would go on a flight to Rwanda since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister.
In other news, police are to take the lead in investigations into some of the allegations about bets placed by politicians on the general election. Sir Philip Davies has become the latest Tory candidate to be accused of gambling on the date of the election. He reportedly bet £8,000 against himself, holding his seat, according to The Sun, but there is no suggestion he's done anything illegal. At least 5 Conservatives are being investigated by the Gambling Commission as part of its inquiry into bets on the timing of the July 4th poll. Labour has also been dragged into the row, suspending one candidate after he was investigated by the regulator for betting on himself to lose his seat. Junior doctors in England are walking off the job today for an 11th time since their dispute began around 20 months ago. Medics are warning that more strike action could take place in the summer if the next government does not move forward negotiations in a timely manner. They're walking out for 5 days in their long-running dispute over pay. Junior doctors want a 35% pay rise. The British Medical Association has said it's ready to talk, and the union has already had some discussions with the Labour Party, it says. And there have been reports that missing British teenager Jay Slater has been seen watching the Euros football tournament as the search for him continues. The probe's been thrown into further confusion as the Tenerife mayor says Spanish police are examining CCTV footage and suggests several witnesses claim to have seen him. The 19-year-old has been missing for 11 days now. Yesterday, Spanish police searched a mountainous area by helicopter, with sniffer dogs also being used on the ground. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with Andrew Piss and Bev Turner.
So, it's the aftermath, the final leaders' debate between Sunak and Starmer. There's no doubt, Bev, it was the fieriest. It struck me that Sunak's got nothing to lose. The polls are still showing 20-point lead for Labour. One poll actually suggesting yesterday the Lib Dems will be second and the Tories in third place. So he threw everything at it.
When you see Sunak on the ropes like this, you get a much better version of him. Because he's panicking, clearly, understandably, he starts to come out swinging, and we've seen not enough of that.
Yeah.
Because anger is a normal human emotion,
yeah.
And that's what we see from him at a time like this, a desperation, whereas previously he's just been playing it so safe and just being such a robot.
And yet again, Starmer, the lawyer, the accomplished lawyer, the barrister, KC, who was Director of Public Prosecution, seemed oddly flat-footed again.
Very.
Which I don't understand.
Well,
because he's got his preordained lines, which he's been given by his team, and he's sticking to them, whatever's thrown at him.
who is giving him his lines, though? That's the question, because he's clearly not talking from the heart. And, in fact, the star of last night's debate, I would say, was audience member Robert Blackstock. We're going to talk to him just a moment. This is what he said.
Mr Sunak, I think you made a fair job of being Chancellor, but you're a pretty mediocre Prime Minister. Sir Keir, I think that your strings are being pulled by very senior members of the Labour Party. Are you two really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country?
And Robert joins us now. Good morning, Robert. I bet you had no idea the attention you were going to receive for this question, but just going to the point that Andrew and I were just discussing, is the fact that Keir Starmer appears to be constantly reading from a script because somebody is giving him that script? And who do you think that is?
Well, I think there's two very powerful ladies in the Labour Party, Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner. And I also think that Tony Blair is involved somewhere along the line as well. So they would be my guess, and I think that they're almost telling him what to say, what to do, and yes, that would be it.
And Robert, it's interesting you mentioned Tony Blair, because when I heard you make the point, powerful people are pulling your strings, I thought, I wonder if Robert knows how involved Tony Blair is in Team Starmer, because Tony Blair runs an institute, the Tony Blair Institute, which has provided staff that are seconded to Starmer's office. They've provided policy documents, and they are on the phone the whole time. Blair talks to Starmer all the time. So does Peter Mandelson, who was his spin doctor. So I think you've probably put your finger on something there, and I think a lot of what's happening here, Starmer is fighting the same general election that Blair fought in 1997.
Yes, I would agree with that. And as I say, you don't have to look very far through any of the news bulletins or any of the briefings to see that Tony Blair, his influence is there. You know, it's there to be seen.
And why is that? I'm interested though, Robert, why would that be a bad thing for you? What is it about Tony Blair's ethos and his vision of the world that you would find worrying?
Well, it's not so much that. The concern that I've got is that Sir Keir Starmer, he has to be the man that's fronting up the UK. So he has to be the man to make the decisions and not the man that's being told what to say. And that's where I think the problem lies.
Interesting during the campaign, Robert, as you know, Starmer has got himself into all sorts of difficulties about what I think is probably the most straightforward question a politician should ever be asked. How do you define a woman? When he famously said, when he was asked, can only a woman have a cervix? And he said it's not a straightforward question. He now says he's clarified his position, and he's clarified his position after speaking not to a woman, but to Tony Blair.
Yeah. Yeah, but as I say, unfortunately, last night, I don't think either of the two leaders gave straightforward yes-no answers to any of the questions. And even when they were sort of batting the ball backwards and forwards between themselves, they didn't sort of answer each other's questions. So it was a bit like Prime Minister's questions, to be honest with you.
And it's so frustrating for the viewers in that situation, and for the electorate, actually, Robert. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think on the broadcast last night you were saying that you don't know who you're going to vote for. The election is a week today. Where are you at now?
I'm still in the same place. Last night didn't really alter my views at all. It didn't swing me one way or the other. So I've got less than a week now to make my mind up. But talking with friends, there's a lot of us in exactly the same position. So it's, and again, I was on a radio broadcast this morning, and there were people there saying exactly the same thing, that you know, they haven't made their minds up. So the landslide perhaps is not there, but it could well be.
Yeah. If you had to score it, Robert, last night, who was there a winner, or was it an ugly score draw or a 0-0 draw?
It was definitely a draw. It was 0-0. Neither seemed to do particularly well against the other. And just to repeat, they didn't really answer any of the questions specifically, and that is what I think really annoys the British public. That our politicians, they say an awful lot of words, but they don't mean anything. That's the problem.
Do you think, and when you said, is this the best we've got, Sunak versus Starmer, do you think the calibre of leaders is in decline?
Well, I believe so, yes. And we haven't got anybody that's got any charisma. You know, if you're on the world stage, you know, representing the UK, then you've got to have something that the foreign journalists and the foreign politicians say, we know who that is. It's the British Prime Minister. Rather than just being at the end of the queue or the end of the photo shoot, he's got to be centre, right in the middle, and portraying something that is typically British, if you like.
So therefore, there might be something wrong with our system, Robert, in terms of who politics appeals to. You know, what kind of people out there get to a career crossroads and think, shall I go into business, shall I go into law, medicine, or shall I go and try and be a politician? So how do we change that system, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question, because I certainly wouldn't want to be a politician, or wouldn't have wanted to be a politician. I wouldn't have wanted the flag. I really don't know. It's a good question. I'm not really sure how, because you do have such a cross-section of people that are politicians. I mean, in Nottingham, we have a total variety of people that are members of Parliament, or were members of Parliament.
All right, Robert. Well, Robert, good luck with your with your soul searching about who's going to you're going to vote for next week. And thank you for your question last night, because I think it spoke for many people, not just watching and listening to this programme, but across the country. It spoke for a lot of us. So thank you for that, Robert. Robert Blackstock.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Great stuff.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Do you know what I want? After the election, I want him to come on and tell us who he decided to vote for in the end.
Just that, and I'm sure our producers will be on to that.
Because Christopher Hope interviewed him last night on Patrick Christie's post-debate show. And Robert did say there that he had voted Conservative in the past. And he's one of those classic current floating voters right now. Do you punish the Tories, or do you give Labour a chance? And it's a different mindset when you go into that voting booth. Or do you do a protest vote and vote for somebody else?
And there will be some people who say they're so awful, I'm not going to vote for any of them. Don't do that.
Yes.
Vote for someone. And, of course, some people say to me, well, if there was a box which said none of the above, I'd tick that. Well, you can spoil your ballot paper. That is registered. Yeah. The numbers of spoilt ballot papers are counted up, and they will be a toll.
And don't forget to take your ID on Thursday.
Otherwise, you don't vote. Now, up next, we're going to be speaking to a man who has coached many of our front bench politicians, Graham Davis, to give his verdict on the final leaders' debate. And as Robert just said, are they really the best we have to offer? I'm afraid that's it. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So, should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands?
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists. But there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is people, kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. Like, if those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. Right. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tory.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9:48, Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Political presentation coach Graham Davies is with us. Graham, you've been with us from the beginning of this epically interesting, not general election campaign. You saw particularly the first leaders' debate between Sunak and Starmer. Last night, I thought it was much more passionate, certainly on Sunak's part, when you're 20 points behind. You almost threw the kitchen sink at him. But did he win, or did he put people off because he was too aggressive?
Well, there was certainly no legacy of bonhomie from the first debate. It was all brutality from the word go. It was like watching two actuaries in expensive suits in a cage fight. But also, this time, instead of the moderator having a sort of school marmy, settle down boys attitude, she was like a referee in some form of combat. She let them go at each other.
I thought
and I thought that was good.
Yeah.
Because actually seeing them arguing was a good thing. But of course, at this stage of this quite long campaign, you can't persuade people anymore with facts. You can't move their minds. But I believe you can still move their hearts. And actually, at this stage, the election boils down to this. It's a battle to see which of the presidential candidates is the least dislikable. And that's a battle that maybe Keir Starmer hasn't definitely won, but it is a battle that Rishi Sunak has definitely lost.
Because do you think he became over as dislikable last night because he kept interrupting?
Well, he clearly had been psyched up by his team to go for it, to go for it, to go for it.
Graham, I think we've just lost your mic a moment. We're just going to try and address that. So we'll carry on talk about this. The thing that I was sort of considering, especially having been at those Trick Awards at the on Tuesday, was Nigel Farage is cutting through with the public.
Of course.
And why is that? Partly because he doesn't play being a politician. He has much less to lose, you might say. And I was going to say, I think we've got you back. What does Nigel do that the other two don't in terms of presentation?
He treats things like a cabaret as opposed to a political debate. He prepares effectively, he selects his material, then edits it, and I think he also rehearses. He treats it like an adrenalised episode as opposed to something where, in fact, people are essentially reading out pre-prepared lines.
Isn't that just talking from the heart, though? Isn't that the difference? Is it that Nigel's not necessarily rehearsed? He just believes what he's saying.
Or does he make it look like he's talking from the heart?
I think that he rehearses it so well and so professionally that it looks unrehearsed. And indeed, that is epitomised by the opening line of his closing speech at the beginning of the Seven Pygmies debate, where he said, unlike the other people on stage, I don't need an autocue because I believe what I'm saying. But that didn't mean he hadn't prepared it. It meant he'd learnt it and internalised it.
But it also doesn't mean he doesn't believe it. It means that he might be telling the truth.
Yes, he may well be. And that level of rehearsal enhances the truth rather than gets in the way of it.
So Sunak's people clearly did say, you've got nothing to lose, you're 20 points behind. One poll suggesting yesterday the Tories could come third behind the Lib Dems, God help us. So throw everything at it. Was that the wrong strategy in your view?
Throw nearly everything at it, but keep control would have been my advice. He was short, sharp, starting to use shorter sentences than he'd used before in the previous debate. He would say it, then he'd support it, but again, yet again, he forgot to shut it. And when he goes on and on and on, when he's made the point and then rephrases the point and then says it for a third time, he becomes more dislikable by the second. So that's his own stuff. Now, the interruptions, to a certain extent, did work for him in the sense that clearly it put off Keir Starmer. He was still ruffled by them. And also he managed to expose Starmer's weaknesses, especially in relation to immigration and also tax. The vagueness was exposed by the interruptions. But once the interruptions go so far, he becomes more and more dislikable.
For people who didn't see that, that was the moment at which Keir Starmer suggested that he would send people back to Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran. And Sunak said, you're going to sit down and negotiate with the Taliban. It really landed a punch, didn't it?
It did. And it was a short, sharp punch. He could do it with the smallest number of words. You see, Rishi should probably take this counsel, that the persuasiveness of your words depends on their quality, not their quantity. And he's better when he's short and he's sharp.
Why is somebody like Starmer, who is an accomplished lawyer, so flat-footed? Why was he ruffled? Why isn't he able to parry it away with a silken answer? Is it because he was so rehearsed and he was told to be risk-averse, stick to your line, because he looked uncomfortable when Sunak was on the attack, and he doesn't look prime ministerial.
He's not very clever.
When you're...
I
maybe that's true of all barristers, Bev.
He's a bit thick.
I do wonder about that.
His preparation and his thought processes are that of a prosecuting barrister. And he's done some very big, complex cases in his time. And what you do as a barrister is prepare things in writing.
That's right.
And to a certain extent, you're reading that out in court, either to a judge or to the jury. There is some spontaneity, but not very much. He hasn't really adapted all that well to the cleanliness of the courtroom, to the combat of political debate.
Very interesting, Graham.
Right.
Fascinating.
Political presentation coach, if you're not sure who Graham Davis is, that's why he talks so brilliantly about all of that. Right, up next. Former Labour Defence Secretary Geoff Hume. We're going to see what he thinks of Sir Keir Starmer's leadership. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Alex Deakin has your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Unseasonably wet and windy weather hitting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland this morning. Further south, things are turning cooler. Still pretty warm across East Anglia and the southeast, but far from warm in the northwest. Gusty, blustery conditions for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Quite a bit of rain coming in here as well. Grey start over the Midlands and southern England, but it will brighten up here as we go through the day. A few showers possible for Wales and developing across northern England also. Temperature-wise, well, still up into the mid-20s across East Anglia and the southeast before things turn fresher. Elsewhere, temperatures are down compared to yesterday's, and certainly it feels a lot cooler with this very wet and windy weather across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Not a day to be in the Highlands of Scotland. Quite blustery conditions, but largely dry across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers coming into southern Scotland, wet and windy also for Northern Ireland. Again, not great conditions here. Gusty winds and rain rain on and off throughout the afternoon. A few showers will get into northwest England, the odd one for Wales, but much of the south of England, the Midlands and East Anglia will be dry once that cloud from that weather front, which is introducing the cooler air, clears away. It stays pretty blustery and wet through the evening and overnight across Northern Ireland and western Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing further south and a much more comfortable night as well. Much less humid tonight compared to the night just gone, as temperatures dip down to 12 to 13 degrees Celsius. So a fresher feel for Friday, and generally a fine day across the south. Still pretty gusty across Scotland, still plenty more showers to come across the north and the west. A few showers for Northern Ireland, but generally a drier day here, and the winds will be easing tomorrow too. Breezy across northern England with a few showers zipping through, but the bulk of England and Wales looking dry. There'll be some sunny spells instead of the heat. Temperatures much closer to average for the time of year. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Argyll and Bute, the A85 is closed each way between Oban and Dunbeg after an accident in the early hours of this morning. In West Dunbartonshire, the A814 is closed each way along Glasgow Road off the A82 in Dumbarton after a fire overnight. The M42 from Staffordshire into Warwickshire is closed southbound from junction 10 at Tamworth to 9 at Curdworth for repairs after a lorry caught fire yesterday afternoon. There are long delays as you divert. In Essex, the A12 is blocked southbound by an accident between junctions 28 and 27 near Colchester. There are queues from junction 29 and delays through Colchester as you divert. In Swansea, the A48 is closed east of the Transatlantic traffic lights for watermain repairs. And in Hampshire on the A27, there's a lane closed westbound off the A3M near Portsmouth after an accident causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you can win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
10 a.m. on Thursday, the 27th of June, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, he came out swinging, didn't he? The Prime Minister with the Labour leader in their final, very feisty TV debate last night. But the audience member stole the show, Robert Blackstock, with this question.
Are you two really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country?
Junior doctors' strike. A 5-day strike in England started this morning over pay. But it's looking very politically motivated with the election being held a week today. Do you think it's pointless?
I think it's cruel. Now, Sir Keir Starmer finally distances himself from lovey actor David Tennant, who told Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch to shut up, and he wished she didn't exist. An actor or an activist?
And allegedly, another sighting of Jay Slater. Tenerife locals say that they spotted the missing teen celebrating whilst watching the Euros. It's certainly an unfolding story, and we will bring you the latest.
There's so many conspiracy theories now about Jay Slater. How terrible for his mum and dad who are out there searching for him if he is on the run for some reason or is shacked up with a gang or something, because they're worrying that he's lying at the bottom of a ravine dead.
The speculation being that he's involved with some sort of criminal activity on the island, or he's just tried to get home and gone missing, but it's certainly adding up to being very difficult for everybody who's involved in that case.
But also for the Spanish police, who've put helicopters in the air, drones, hundreds of police officers searching the island for him. If it were that he is on the run, then I think that family's going to get a very big bill. And they are crowdfunding as we speak.
Yeah, they've raised about £30,000, the family. There's a very strange twist to this tale about who he was with. We're going to be getting to the bottom of this. We're going to be talking to somebody about this story in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. gbnews.com/your say to let us know your thoughts. First, though, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. It's 10 o'clock. The latest from the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer returned to the campaign trail today after they clashed over illegal immigration and the betting row in a television debate last night, with just 1 week before voters go to the polls. The Labour leader accused the Prime Minister of being bullied into taking action in the betting scandal, while Mr Sunak repeatedly warned voters not to surrender to Labour's tax and migration plans. The pair also answered questions from an invited studio audience, with one asking how either leader was planning to control illegal immigration.
The Rwanda plan is a deterrent. You just have to listen to what the illegal migrants themselves are saying. One of them just said, most of us are still in France due to the fear we have about Rwanda. Another one said, I won't cross the channel until the Rwanda plan is destroyed. If Labour win, the people smugglers are going to need a bigger boat. Don't surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
Record numbers coming across the channel. And he says it's a deterrent. There are a few hundred that would go on a flight to Rwanda at huge expense to the taxpayer. There are tens of thousands. 50,000 people have come since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister.
In other news, police are to take the lead in investigations into some of the allegations about bets placed by politicians on the general election. Sir Philip Davies has become the latest Tory candidate to be accused of gambling on the election date. He reportedly bet £8,000 against himself, holding his seat according to The Sun, but there is no suggestion he's done anything illegal. At least 5 Conservatives are being investigated by the Gambling Commission as part of its inquiry into bets on the timing of the July 4th poll. Labour has also been dragged into the row, suspending one candidate after he was investigated by the regulator for betting on himself to lose his own seat. Junior doctors in England are walking off the job today for an 11th time since their dispute began around 20 months ago. Medics are warning that more strike action could take place in the summer if the next government does not move forward negotiations in a timely manner. Medics are walking out for 5 days now in their long-running dispute over pay. Junior doctors want a 35% pay rise. The British Medical Association has said it's ready to talk, and the union has already had some discussions with the Labour Party, it says. Junior doctors say Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has promised talks on the 5th of July if the party wins the election. The BMA insists their junior members are historically underpaid.
Our pay at the moment for a doctor in their first year is £15.50. We're asking for that to be £21. £21 an hour for a doctor that's starting life-saving treatment on our loved ones. £21 an hour for a doctor with student loans of £100,000. And because the pay cut has been so strong, we're losing doctors. We don't have enough. And when we don't have enough doctors, we're seeing patients die needlessly in the NHS every single week.
Labour's pledging to turbocharge careers advice and work experience in schools to combat skill shortages in the workplace. As part of the party's plans to partner with businesses across the country, Labour says it's committed to delivering 2 weeks' worth of quality work experience for every young person and recruit more than 1,000 new careers advisors. The party says it would build partnerships between schools, colleges and local employers to equip young people with work-ready skills. Labour analysis estimates 1 million children are at risk of receiving inadequate information about the jobs. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says the plans would facilitate a revolution in work readiness, but she also says working people will not be taxed more as a result of this.
We want to grow our economy. We want to make sure we are a strong country for wealth creation, and nothing in our manifesto requires any additional taxes beyond those that we've set out, for example, ending the tax breaks that private schools enjoy. And it's why growing our economy is so central to the mission that Labour and Rachel Reeves have set out, because we know we've got to get out of this doom cycle of low growth and high taxation. We've got to get our economy moving once more and use that as an opportunity to create jobs right across our country.
Liberal Democrats leader Sir Ed Davey says the winner of the general election should pass an emergency budget to fix the healthcare system. The Lib Dems want to see a budget which would be, they say, much more targeted in scope than a normal budget. The party says their manifesto pledges a £9.4 billion spending package for the NHS, healthcare and social care. And there have been reports today that missing British teenager Jay Slater has been seen watching the Euros football tournament as the search for him continues. The probe has been thrown into further confusion as the Tenerife mayor says Spanish police are examining CCTV footage and suggests several witnesses claim to have seen the teen watching the football. The 19-year-old has been missing for 11 days now. Yesterday, Spanish police searched a mountainous area by helicopter, with sniffer dogs also being used on the ground. Jay had gone on holiday for the first time without his parents. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning, it's 10:08. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Well, that Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, she's still in a rage with former Labour Minister Dawn Butler, who she said showed the true face of Labour in this row over women's rights.
So this comes after Doctor Who actor David Tennant commented on Kemi Badenoch at an awards ceremony. Have a look.
That acknowledging that everyone has the right to be who they want to be and live their life how they want to live it, as long as they're not hurting anyone else, should merit any kind of special award or special mention, because it's common sense, isn't it? We shouldn't live in a world where that is worth remarking on. However, until we wake up and Kemi Badenoch doesn't exist anymore, I don't wish ill of her, I just wish her to shut up.
Cheap.
To which Kemi Badenoch replied in a tweet, "I will not shut up. I will not be silenced by men who prioritise applause from Stonewall over the safety of women and girls. A rich, lefty, white, male celebrity so blinded by ideology that he can't see the optics of attacking the only black woman in government by calling publicly for my existence to end." Well, joining us now, political commentators Matthew Stadlen and Alex Armstrong to debate this. Matthew, let me come to you first. Morning, gentlemen. What did you make of Kemi's response, Matt?
Well, I'm still reeling, Bev, because while I've been waiting to come on, I think I heard you say that Keir Starmer, probably our Prime Minister in a week's time, is a bit thick.
Yeah, I did. But we can talk about that on another occasion. We were talking about the fact that he wasn't thinking on his feet during the debate. So let's stick with this issue. Response to Kemi Badenoch, please.
I think it's a bit of a sideshow because, as always with these toxic culture wars, the people who are damaged are the people who are struggling to live their best lives in the real world. And I want to be completely clear about this as someone who is known to be a left-leaning commentator. I absolutely respect women's rights. They've been incredibly hard won. Women have had an incredibly tough time for centuries. And still women are fighting for equality in modern day Britain. So that's the first thing I want to say. I also agree with Keir Starmer that when you talk about other human beings, you should talk about them with decency and with compassion and with understanding. And what he's been trying to do, and he hasn't always got it right, is to try and toe this difficult line, try and navigate a difficult path to make sure that women's rights are protected, but at the same time, we don't throw trans women in particular under the bus. Did I think what David Tennant said was acceptable? No, I didn't. Do I think he really wishes Kemi Badenoch harm? I jolly well hope so. I don't know David Tennant. I thought the way he said it was wrong, and I understand why Kemi Badenoch took great offence at it.
Alex, what I've just heard there is a lot of sort of waffle, really, no offence, Matt, trying to pull together all of these issues whilst covering up this whole kind of left-wing hashtag be kind, but be kind to only certain types of people. Go on, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolute hypocrisy at its finest, isn't it? David Tennant, a man who's just receiving an award at a ceremony that celebrates advocacy and equality for all, is out there attacking the only black woman in the Conservative government. And Kemi Badenoch's absolutely spot on. She shouldn't be told, no woman generally should be told to shut up by activists, let alone someone who is trying to protect women's spaces from, potentially quite aggressive men. The whole thing is just full of irony, isn't it? It's completely exposed the left for what they are.
Oh,
and
rubbish.
the fact that Dawn Butler, the fact that Matthew has completely forgotten to mention Dawn Butler, who's come out clapping her hands, agreeing with David Tennant on telling her to shut up and disappear. He wants this a man, David Tennant, saying for Kemi Badenoch to disappear. What kind of vulgar language is this? And it's typical of the left, isn't it? It really, really is.
Rubbish.
One rule for you, not another rule for me. And that's exactly what the public is seeing today. And Kemi Badenoch's response is spot on.
Matt, I think David Tennant just showed a lack of also knowledge and sophistication about this issue. He was just playing to the crowd in the room because he knew they were going to agree with him.
I have almost zero interest in David Tennant. The idea that David Tennant is being framed as somehow representative.
But what about Dawn Butler then, what about Dawn Butler?
The millions, I'll come to her in a second, the millions and millions of people in this country who are going to be voting for a Labour government in a week's time is totally absurd. This is a celebritisation of politics. Who cares what a former Doctor Who, it might be a good actor or a great actor, I don't know, I haven't seen him in the theatre. Who cares what he thinks about this? I certainly don't. As for Dawn Butler, I don't particularly identify with Dawn Butler's strand of left-wing politics. She's a relatively fringe figure within the modern Labour Party. Yes, she's got a big following online, but I don't think she stands for or represents what Keir Starmer is trying to achieve with this Labour Party. He's changed it massively. He's literally stopped his predecessor from running as a Labour candidate or being a Labour MP. Everyone in this country, GB News viewers know that Starmer has changed the Labour Party. It's clear as day.
Clearly not. Clearly not. How has he changed the Labour Party? You're just saying that Dawn Butler doesn't represent the current Labour Party, but here she is, standing for election under Keir Starmer's banner.
Dawn Butler should not, in my view, have stood up for David Tennant in the way that she did, because I've already made perfectly clear
So how's the Labour Party changed
what David Tennant said was ill-judged. And I cannot imagine standing on a public platform and speaking in the way that he did, because quite obviously optics matter, and it is true that Kemi Badenoch is the only female black person, the only black woman in the government, in the cabinet. And so to talk about her in that way, although I can't believe for a second he intended it in a racist way, but to talk about her in that way and to tell a woman, given all the history of misogyny that I've already outlined and the discrimination against women, and it's ongoing, to tell a woman to shut up is unacceptable. So I think Dawn Butler might have been better placed if she hadn't involved herself in this row. But does she stand for Keir Starmer's Labour Party and values more generally? I don't think she does.
OK, thank you, gentlemen. Yeah. Matthew Stadler, Alex Armstrong, always great value. Thank you both.
In the studio with us is the former Labour Defence Secretary, Jeff Hoon, who I've known for a very long time. Jeff, they've debated that. I'd rather talk to you. You were a Labour MP in 1992 when the Tories won an improbable election victory. 1997, you went into government for the first time in 18 years. What's it like? Because you haven't been in power for 18 years. How do you know what to do? How do you know what levers to pull? You were a minister immediately. I mean, was it daunting?
It is daunting. It's a huge challenge, particularly when Labour candidates will have been fighting hard fights up and down the country in difficult constituencies sometimes, and then suddenly to be parachuted into government without much real experience of the civil service. It was almost like a curtain opening on the stage to reveal lots of people, lots of participants who, frankly, you didn't know anything about before. And
well, I'm thinking of the first Blair cabinet. Margaret Beckett was probably one of the few who'd had ministerial experience, but as a very junior minister for 5 minutes in 1974.
I think Jack Cunningham was also a minister previously.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for most of us, I recognise it was a very new experience. And I think Tony Blair has written about the fact that even he, as Prime Minister, didn't quite know which were the levers to pull in that first period in government, and it took him some time to get used to the process and what to do, frankly.
Talking of pulling levers and Tony Blair, I don't know whether you saw during the debate last night, but there was the viewer who we've just spoken to this morning who said that he believes that Keir Starmer is still now having his levers pulled by Tony Blair. Is that true?
I don't accept that for a moment. Keir Starmer is very much his own man. He's actually got a lot more experience of government than most future prime ministers might expect to have.
No, he's only been an MP since 2015, never been a minister.
Well, no, but he's run a government, in effect, a government department.
Because he was Director of Public Prosecutions.
As Director of Public Prosecutions and had a team of civil servants. I think that was the big change for me, going back to your previous question. Suddenly, having been surrounded by other people in the Labour Party, as a minister, you have to deal with a very large civil service. Experts, people who've been in their job for very many years. I arrived in what was then the Lord Chancellor's Department, not really having had any experience of dealing with those people before.
And if we believe Yes Minister, quite often the civil servants can pull the wool over the minister's eyes, particularly a young, inexperienced minister like you would have been in 97. Did you have to be careful, wary of that?
Actually, I found, in contrast, I had a private secretary who really supported me very strongly in that first period. And I think the civil service, whilst remaining politically impartial, were ready for a change in 97.
Yeah, which I think they are now.
And frankly, I suspect that's true.
Yeah.
They will be absolutely neutral. They will maintain the very highest traditions. But again, I think what has happened recently is comparable to the period of John Major's government, because towards 1997, there was very little legislation, there was very little happening. The civil service were waiting for that change. And although I'm not part of it any longer, I suspect that something similar is happening. There hasn't been much legislation in recent times. I think they will be looking for leadership. They will be looking for direction.
Yeah.
They'll be looking for legislation, frankly, because they want to see their policy ideas translated into reality.
There are similarities too. Accident-prone. John Major's government was accident-prone, gaff after gaff, sleaze, scandals, and we've seen that, haven't we, with the dying days of the Sunak government.
I think there are lots of comparisons. It was Maastricht and that whole process in the early part of John Major's administration that I think made him, together with very great difficulties on his own backbenchers, reluctant to legislate because he was never quite sure whether he could win a vote and get legislation through. And I think something similar has happened in the dying days of this Conservative administration.
Let me ask you a bread and butter issue about the campaign. Darren Jones, Chief Secretary of the Treasury, normally seen as a safe pair of hands. Telegraph have got hold of a tape where he's telling his constituents actually the cost of decarbonising the economy, the race to net zero by 2030, is going to cost hundreds of billions of pounds. Well, they haven't told us that before. This is the real truth, isn't it, Jeff? That if we're going to go for this green dash, it's going to cost everybody watching this programme and listening a lot of money.
But what Darren Jones was referring to was the way in which government has to stimulate investment from the private sector. So that huge number he's talking about is the required investment from private enterprise looking at the opportunities.
Well, what if you don't get it?
Well, that's something that we will have to deal with.
Well, that's a big if, isn't it?
Well, it's an if, but I've been at this game long enough to know that I shouldn't deal with those kinds of questions. What I think is important about what he was saying is that it will be a partnership. Government has a role to play, undoubtedly, in shaping the nature of our environmental future. But at the same time, the investment has to come from the private sector. That's where the billions of pounds come from.
I get that, Jeff, but don't you think it would have been better if the Labour had been up front about this rather than we get this from a leak tape recording of the next Chief Secretary of the Treasury? That's just what infuriates people. Why aren't we being told all this up front?
I think that the Labour Party will be very clear about.
I don't think they have.
Well, if you'll forgive me, I'll try and explain.
Yeah.
We've talked categorically and very plainly in the manifesto about the need for growth. Part of that growth undoubtedly will involve investment in green policies, in ensuring that the country is decarbonised. That involves money, there's no doubt about it, but that money has to come from the private sector. And they will only invest if they see a stable economy, which again is why Keir Starmer has talked so much about stability, trying to provide the country with a level of activity by government which is not swinging around in the way we've seen in recent times. And I think that's absolutely admirable. And all the people I know in the business community are looking forward to that degree of stability, because from that stability, they are then allowed to invest. They won't invest if they believe that the economy is bouncing around from one place to another. They will invest with that kind of stability, aiming for growth.
OK,
Right.
Unfortunately, we've been beaten by the clock, Jeff. Thank you so
Jeff
much.
Hume, former Labour Defence Secretary. I wonder if he's going to be in the House of Lords soon. Interesting.
Right, up next, yet another poll has been released, and this time it's good news for Reform UK. Find out how many seats they are apparently in line for. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The University of Cambridge has told students to stop flirting with staff under a new policy banning sexual relationships with professors. The new rules, which come into force next month, beginning of July, include a warning against behaviour that could be interpreted as flirtatious. University staff have been told they must report any behaviour that could constitute a student making advances towards a personal, particularly intimate relationship with them. If you're a tutor, how do you interpret what is flirting and what is just sort of like having a bit of banter?
In fact, you've got to
Very nice trousers, by the way.
Thank you.
You see, you didn't even recognise.
Oh, I didn't.
He's coming
I think I'm blushing now. I'm blushing.
So, what's flirting? What's me complimenting your very well-fitting trousers? Yes.
Well, there is a line, because obviously when you're 18 and you go to university, it might be the first time you're away from home. It might be the first time that you're open to maybe a bit of a nightlife, social activity, drinking, and all the rest of it. On the flip side, I know a couple who, the pupil ended up dating their professor, and they've been together for about sort of 15 years now. So I used to go after lectures with my professor and the whole seminar. We used to go to the pub afterwards, and I became very good friends with, she was a mature student. She was on the very, very far left of political. You wondered where that was going for a second, didn't you?
We're both reading a huge sigh of relief.
Very quick for you, Joe. We're running out of very nice trousers as well. We're running
Thank you, not as snug as Charlie. I think you've got to have some rules in place that there's no abuse of power. Policing it's difficult. We ought to be in a position where you can say, get off, back off, or, banter's fine. Actually, I hate that word. I hate it almost as much as woke. Go on, email in.
Thank you very much. I'm flirting with both.
The People's Channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody. in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It is 10:25, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Really fascinating seeing Geoffrey, and I remember him as a young MP in 1992.
Do you?
Yeah. And he was a rising star in the Labour Party.
Because he's Ashfield, wasn't he? Yeah.
Ashfield, Stephen Pound.
Stephen Pound chipping in there.
And look who's back.
Yeah.
Emma Webb is back.
First time in the new studio.
Do you like it?
We now have to go
Very
through all the
nice.
flipping names in that constituency because you just mentioned the name of a candidate. But thank you very much.
Right.
Don't worry.
Let us start with your opinions. That's what we're here to hear about.
Yeah.
So the election debate last night.
Yes.
Who do you think won that, Stephen? Does it make any difference with a week to go?
Well, I thought what was interesting is that, you know, with Rishi, the brakes were off there. He was absolutely cooking on gas, wasn't he? He went steaming in there. Why couldn't he have done that a couple of months ago?
Yeah.
Actually, though, from a Labour point of view, thank heavens he didn't do that a couple of months ago. I think we actually saw interesting aspects of both the characters there. I mean, in many ways, Keir Starmer was just looking horrified at this risible nonsense about the £2,000 tax rise. But you can't deny the fact that Rishi Sunak, when he did this thing about are you going to negotiate with the Ayatollahs and the Taliban?
Oh, it's devastating.
He had nothing. Starmer
that was
had
a
nothing.
torpedo below the waterline.
And he had, and what's I find still amazing, he's supposed to be this sophisticated, clever lawyer. There was no response. I mean, it was a huge gaffe.
Yeah, but Andrew, you know and I know that Rishi Sunak had nothing to lose and Keir had everything to lose.
Yeah. Well, he lost a lot on that.
50-50.
But it kind of raises this issue. I said before I don't think Keir Starmer is particularly bright, but it does raise this issue of what quantifies intelligence. Like, what is it to be an intelligent politician? Is it about being able to think on your feet, or should you just be able to talk from the heart?
Emotional intelligence.
Well, I mean, there are different ways of being intelligent, but there's a certain types and certain degrees of intelligence that you expect from people who might become the next Prime Minister.
Well, he will.
And actually, it's a really sorry state, I think, that to have a current Prime Minister debating a KC who may very well become Prime Minister, and for the debate to be so profoundly mediocre, even though Rishi Sunak did perform better than usual. The exception proves the rule in many ways. I think Keir Starmer has gotten away, not quite scot-free, but he's been given an easy ride, I think, because there's been so much focus on the Conservative Party's failures. And so he hasn't really, until this last week, been subjected to proper scrutiny. And when you ask him for actual details, I think a brilliant exchange where Rishi kept pressing him on the migrants, and he just says, well, we'll process them. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to negotiate with the Taliban? Are you going to negotiate with the Ayatollahs? And I think it's just clear as day that he's not living in the real world. When he gets into office and is faced with the real challenges, how does he think he's actually going to do those things? People need to know how much things are going to cost and how they're going to be done before they can make an informed vote.
Well, he'll just pick up the phone to Tony Blair and ask him what to do, won't he, Stephen?
Good heavens, no, he's got a pager for that, is he?
A pager? Does he send him a fax?
Your age.
No, that was back in '97 when we all had to wear these pagers.
I remember.
Breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah.
And Dennis Skinner kept dropping.
But that's what the suspicion is, and in fact, that's what the viewer who we spoke to earlier this morning says, that we're not sure that Keir Starmer is really in charge and who is pulling his strings.
Oh, come on, nobody's pulling his strings. Read Danny Finkelstein in the Times, who's known him since we were all at LSE together back in the 30s, back in the 80s. And Keir Starmer has been consistent, throughout his life, and he's done an enormous amount. When he was doing pro bono work with the McLibel case, he was helping people out. He was a human rights lawyer in a particularly an unforgiving environment that he was working in.
So you'd think he would know better when it comes to the European Court of Human Rights.
Exactly.
You'd think that he would be aware, and perhaps he is aware. Perhaps he is aware that he doesn't have any real intentions to deal with the
We're under pressure on time. I want to talk about another really interesting legal dilemma here. This is the story about the driver of the Land Rover ploughed into that school in Wimbledon last year. 2 8-year-old girls were killed. She faces no criminal charges because she'd had her first ever epileptic seizure at the wheel. The parents of the little girls are outraged because they say there should be some sanction.
Well, this is the case down in the Study School down in Wimbledon, and on the one hand,
when it happened, we were on air. We thought it was a terror attack.
Well, as everybody, 2 young girls were killed. But look, the reality is that there are some things which are absolutely unavoidable. You know, insurance companies used to use the expression "an act of God." I'm not sure about that, but in this particular case, it is not the woman's fault. There was no, you know, in law they have this principle, mens rea. You have to actually have, you know, the impetus to commit the crime. You can't. There's got to be the intention there. Look, nothing would bring those 2 girls back. And why destroy another life? It's horrendous. It's tragic. But actually prosecuting that woman for having an epileptic fit at the wheel of a car does nobody any service.
She is going to live with the guilt of this for the rest of her life. She is traumatised. She still has no memory of what happened either.
You read my mind, because I was going to say, you know, what's the purpose of some kind of sanction of punishing her? Imagine if you had a seizure and then killed 2 children. That is...
I imagine every time she wakes up in the morning, she's thinking about those little girls.
And you can understand where the parents are coming from, because they're grieving and they want to feel that there is some kind of justice. But unfortunately, there are sometimes situations in which there can be no justice. It is just an horrific situation. And if the woman had no idea that she'd never had an epileptic fit before, she thought she was fit to drive, as Stephen said, you know, there can be no intention there. It's just a horrible accident.
There's no malice aforethought.
No, the rules are very strict. The rules are very strict around as well driving with epilepsy, because my ex-husband developed epilepsy after a head injury, and therefore you have to be a year fit-free on medication before you can even get behind the wheel of a vehicle again.
Oh yes, I mean, I remember a bus driver coming to see me had exactly that situation. He had to produce a lot of medical evidence, but this had never happened before.
So I think it's sympathy all round. I think
tragic for everybody.
Right, we've got to move on just for now. Emma and Stephen will be back in a little while, though. Don't go anywhere. Here's the news headlines with Tatiana.
Bev, thank you. The top stories this hour. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer returned to the campaign trail today after they clashed over illegal immigration and the betting row in a television debate last night, with just a week to go before voters go to the polls. The Labour leader accused the Prime Minister of being bullied into taking action in the betting scandal, while Mr Sunak repeatedly warned voters not to surrender to Labour's tax and migration plans. The pair also answered questions from a studio audience, with one asking how they're each planning to control illegal immigration.
The Rwanda plan is a deterrent. You just have to listen to what the illegal migrants themselves are saying. One of them just said, most of us are still in France due to the fear we have about Rwanda. Another one said, I won't cross the channel until the Rwanda plan is destroyed. If Labour win, the people smugglers are going to need a bigger boat. Don't surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
Record numbers coming across the channel. And he says it's a deterrent. There are a few hundred that would go on a flight to Rwanda at huge expense to the taxpayer. There are tens of thousands. 50,000 people have come since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister.
Police are to take the lead in investigations into some of the allegations about bets placed by politicians on the general election. Sir Philip Davies has become the latest Tory candidate to be accused of gambling on the election date. He reportedly bet £8,000 against himself, holding his seat, according to The Sun. But there's no suggestion he's done anything illegal. At least 5 Conservatives are being investigated by the Gambling Commission as part of its inquiry into bets on the timing of the July 4th poll. Labour has also been dragged into the row, suspending one candidate after he was investigated by the regulator for betting on himself to lose his seat. Junior doctors in England are walking off the job for an 11th time in almost a year. Medics are warning that more strike action could take place in the summer if the next government doesn't move negotiations forward in a timely manner. Junior doctors are walking out for 5 days this time in their long-running dispute over pay. They want a 35% pay rise. The British Medical Association says it's ready to talk, and the union has already had some discussions with the Labour Party, it says. And there are reports that missing British teenager Jay Slater has been seen watching the Euros football tournament as the search for him continues. The probe has been thrown into further confusion as the Tenerife mayor says Spanish police are examining CCTV footage and suggests several witnesses claim to have seen the teen. The 19-year-old has been missing for 11 days now. Yesterday, Spanish police searched a mountainous area by helicopter, with sniffer dogs also being used on the ground. This morning, one media outlet has reported that Jay Slater's mother has withdrawn a GoFundMe donation page that was set up to raise money for the family. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2639 and €1.1823. The price of gold is £1,828 and 36 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,212 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
So if you would like to join us on election night, GB News will be live in Essex with Michelle Dewberry and Patrick Christie's, where they're going to be hosting a GB News exclusive coverage, which will no doubt be a huge amount of fun.
So if you want to be a part of our exclusive live audience in Essex, you can apply now either by scanning the QR code on the screen or you visit gbnews.com/election party.
That is going to be so much more interesting to watch than some boring BBC output, very dry. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, Rory Blimmin Stewart's on channel. Well, who would want to watch that? No thanks.
Patrick and Michelle, that is the dream team. Right, still to come, we're going to be talking to the man who managed Earth, Wind and Fire. He's been
Winter Wonderland.
Oh, no.
I love that song.
I did not know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, he has been caught up in
Winter
Heathrow
Wonderland.
air baggage chaos. OK, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Unseasonably wet and windy weather hitting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland this morning. Further south, things are turning cooler. Still pretty warm across East Anglia and the southeast, but far from warm in the northwest. Gusty, blustery conditions for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Quite a bit of rain coming in here as well. Grey start over the Midlands and southern England, but it will brighten up here as we go through the day. A few showers possible for Wales and developing across northern England also. Temperature-wise, well, still up into the mid-20s across East Anglia and the southeast before things turn fresher. Elsewhere, temperatures are down compared to yesterday's, and certainly it feels a lot cooler with this very wet and windy weather across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Not a day to be in the Highlands of Scotland. Quite blustery conditions, but largely dry across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers coming into southern Scotland, wet and windy also for Northern Ireland. Again, not great conditions here. Gusty winds and rain on and off throughout the afternoon. A few showers will get into northwest England, the odd one for Wales, but much of the south of England, the Midlands and East Anglia will be dry once that cloud from that weather front, which is introducing the cooler air, clears away. It stays pretty blustery and wet through the evening and overnight across Northern Ireland and western Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing further south and a much more comfortable night as well. Much less humid tonight compared to the night just gone, as temperatures dip down to 12 to 13 degrees Celsius. So a fresher feel for Friday and generally a fine day across the south. Still pretty gusty across Scotland, still plenty more showers to come across the north and the west. A few showers for Northern Ireland, but generally a drier day here, and the winds will be easing tomorrow too. Breezy across northern England with a few showers zipping through, but the bulk of England and Wales looking dry. There'll be some sunny spells instead of the heat. Temperatures much closer to average for the time of year. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Argyll and Bute, the A85 is closed each way between Oban and Dunbeg after an accident in the early hours of this morning. In West Dumbartonshire, the A814 is closed each way along Glasgow Road off the A82 in Dumbarton after a fire overnight. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, there's a lane closed anti-clockwise where someone's broken down between junctions 13 and 12 from Worsley to the M62 Eccles interchange. There are queues from junction 18 at Simister Island. The M42 from Staffordshire into Warwickshire's closed southbound from junction 10 at Tamworth to 9 at Curdworth for repairs after a lorry caught fire yesterday afternoon. There are long delays towards the closure and as you divert. In Essex, the A12 is blocked southbound by an accident between junctions 29 and 27 near Colchester, with queues towards there and delays through Colchester as you divert. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
(10:40), Britain's Newsroom. You're in Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. We have to read out the full list of those who've declared their candidacy in the Ashfield constituency because Stephen Pound mentioned one of them. Thank you, Stephen. They are Ria Keane, Labour Party, Debbie Solomon, Tory Party, Lee Anderson, Reform.
Alexander Coates for the Green Party, Jason Zadrozny, who's an independent, Daniel Holmes, who is a Liberal Democrat.
Don't forget, we want to know your say about all the issues we're talking about. Now, Heathrow Airport has been left in chaos after an IT meltdown.
OK, so passengers faced hours of delay waiting to collect their bags. Planes even left the airport without people's luggage.
Some of those effects included the legendary music manager, Nick Stewart, which is why I was singing very badly Boogie Wonderland, because one of his bands was the memorable Earth, Wind and Fire. Nick joins us now. Nick, we're not asking you to reprise the greatest hits, Earth, Wind and Fire's greatest hits, but what happened to you at the airport and how infuriating is it?
I have to tell you straight away that I must report your appalling impersonation of Philip Bailey to the band at the earliest notice. But good morning to both. Thank you for having me on. The problem began with an IT situation on Tuesday night. My wife and I and the couple we're travelling and staying with arrived early on Wednesday morning. Everything looked fine, checked in, bags checked in. Landed in Lefkada's airport and was told by a obviously highly embarrassed young Greek lady that only about 10% of the bags, it may be slightly more, had arrived from Heathrow. 75 bags, therefore, had not arrived, and handed us a QR code piece of paper, which was fine, but I suddenly realised, we all realised, there were many planes affected by this. So this QR code put us into a site that immediately crashed. And it was quite interesting. I tried everything I could. I went through the executive club of BA. That they don't tend to speak to you. You fill in forms. They're quite efficient with their form filling. And finally, late last night, we were told that our luggage had been identified, would be on a flight from London to Athens International, and would be arriving at 2:10. Since when, this morning I should add, since when we've heard nothing. And, you know, it does seem strange now that in the world in which we live with so much going on, that this happens a lot. And I just want to throw something else in, really for the benefit of any of your viewers who are going on holiday and may suffer this again. I think this is, not a public service announcement, but I did use the British Airways social media site on X, and something very interesting happened. I was immediately hacked by scammers who told me to do this and told me to do that and all the rest of it. And I started off quite reluctantly, and I soon realized they were scammers when they asked for my bank account. So if anybody gets in this situation, make sure you check the person that's being in touch with you, because these scammers have no followers and are not following anybody. The only people to trust at British Airways are those that have a yellow tick, and never give anybody your bank details. I hope that's useful.
Yeah. Nick, did they give you any explanation as to why the bags hadn't made it onto the plane? Because sometimes it's this sort of absence, this vacuum of knowledge, which can be most infuriating in these situations.
Very good, Deb. I think the answer is it was a roll-on from what had happened with the IT problem at Heathrow Terminal 5 on the Tuesday night. and they're just not very, I mean, I'm afraid to say, they're just not, a combination of things, they're just not very good at gripping these situations and sorting them out. I mean, we are now going to have to, I hope we get our luggage today, but we may not get it until Saturday. So we've got to go buy a whole set of clothes, right? I know BA promised to compensate us, and they will, but that's an expensive exercise, you think about it. You know, many plane loads of people going out and spending up to £500 to replace what hasn't been delivered. That's very expensive.
But also, Nick, it also takes the edge off your holiday. Yeah, it does. Doesn't it? It takes the edge off your holiday. You've just arrived and it's chaos.
Looking at the view I've got and where I am, that is a factor, but not much of one. I'm in the land of Odysseus and Ithaca, so I really, it seems terrible to complain. And I've made the 2 points. The second one actually was, as much as anything else, is key, because there are a lot of scammers out there, and they are quite clever at what they do. And I just wanted to let your viewers know. As far as my luggage is concerned, it will be delivered. I have had to go out late last night and purchase a few things, including this splendid T-shirt.
Very nice it is too.
We look very smart, Nick, and we really appreciate it, because I do think it's really good to inform people in these situations and to know you're not alone when you're stranded at the hotels with no clothes.
And just tell me, Nick, were Earth, Wind and Fire a dream to work with?
Yes, and they still are, by the way. The "were" bit should be deleted from your vocabulary, Andrew.
All right.
They're still very much alive and kicking, performing Winter Wonderland, performing September, and all the rest of it.
Well,
I'm trying to get them to come back over here.
Oh, really? Well, if they come back, I'm going to the concert. We're just going to play a clip of one of their finest, and then we'll get your response, Nick. Have a listen. Oh. Hear it.
We haven't got the audio.
Well, they look great, but we've got no volume.
There we go. I'm so sorry about that. That was a last-minute addition. We've got no... We should have just got you to sing it, Andrew Pierce. As we know, you can do an excellent job of that.
I don't think Nick would ever come back. Well, that was Nick Stewart. What a great man. We've got to read out a statement from Heathrow, who say...
We advise passengers to check with BA before travelling to the airport. BA passengers in Terminals 5 may be impacted. They're advised to contact BA for assistance. A BA spokesperson goes on to say this issue has been resolved, and we've brought in additional colleagues to support our teams in getting bags back to customers as quickly as possible.
And, of course, it hasn't been resolved because the luggage is now in Athens, and Nick and his wife and friends are on a Greek island, which is a long way from Athens.
Yet another example of this technological society that is relying on this stuff to work, and it never blooming works. And then it costs the companies more. It's almost as if we're being discouraged from travelling at all, because that would keep the eco lot very happy if we all decided to never get on a plane again. Right. Up next, where is Jay Slater? The Lancashire teenager has been missing for 11 days now. We'll bring you the latest twists and turns in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Take a piece of the map.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, you know, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So, yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well? Or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. You know, make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. You know, if you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there's obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programs like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you know, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now to the latest on the search for the Lancashire teenager Jay Slater. You'll be familiar with the story. He's been missing in Tenerife now for 11 days.
The mayor of a town close to where Jay disappeared claims that some locals think they saw the 19-year-old watching the Euro. So Charlie Peters is with us now to bring us up to speed. Charlie, what is the latest?
So they've released a CCTV image of a suspected sighting of Jay Slater just 10 hours after he originally went missing last Monday, the 17th of June, at around 8:50. That's when his location was last seen on his phone, when he was said to have had 1% battery on the phone to his friend Lucy. He said he was dehydrated, thirsty, he'd cut his leg on a cactus and he was going to attempt that walk 36 miles from the northwest, the rural Deteno Park, where he was last heard from, and all the way to the south, Los Cristianos, where his accommodation was. Now, this village, this small town where his reported sighting is, about 3.5 miles away from the park. So it's possible he could have made that journey in 10 hours, but you would suspect that if he had been seen on CCTV, that there'd be further sightings of him as well. But the mayor there, Emilio Jose Navarro, he said that officers from the Civil Guard are investigating the situation. They're also speaking to people who claim that they saw him as well. But as you can imagine, on the island of Tenerife, plenty of people who look like Jay Slater, plenty of young lads from Northern Europe who are on holiday. So at this point, I think it's highly unlikely that actually was him, but we're waiting for further information.
But the police have said enigmatically they are pursuing other lines of inquiry, which suggests they're not just looking for him in the mountain pass where he may have fallen or fainted or collapsed and potentially died. So what is the other thing they're looking at, Charlie? Is it the fact that he may have got involved in some form of criminal gang activity or drugs activity?
Well, this is one of the many strange things about this case is that the Civil Guard and the Spanish police, both from the Canaries and also from the mainland, they've yet to hold a news conference. There's not been one single official press conference from the police or the mountain rescue teams. All the information we're getting is snippets here and there from journalists on the ground and individual bits of information. We haven't had that big press conference to say what they're looking at. All we can tell is based on what we see, which is mountain rescue, sniffer dogs, helicopters and drones all around the rural area. But at the same time, we have heard from a third-party investigator who's been brought in by the family. Debbie Duncan, Jay's mother, has involved many people in this rescue operation. This third-party investigator said yesterday that he was looking at the drug underworld on the island as a potential line of inquiry. He said that there is a significant underworld of criminality on Tenerife. And there are many questions about why on earth were these two boys that Jay was with on the night, why were they renting?
Men, actually. I think they're late 30s, early 40s, apparently.
Why were they renting so far north, away from the area where people are partying, where people don't normally stay? They're in an isolated area, and that's part of the trouble with this search, is they're looking for ravines, mountainous areas, rocky cliff faces. It's a very difficult terrain.
Charlie, we know why the media, the police talk to the media in this country when there's a search on, because you get the message out there, people may have spotted him or her who's missing, and the Spanish police do it differently. And they're not going to change their strategy.
The tactics and procedures seem pretty set now after 11 days. The families made their own appeals, of course, and actually this morning we had an update from Debbie Duncan, Jay's mother, on their GoFundMe page, saying that they are now attempting to extract some of the £36,000 that's been raised in order to support the mountain rescue teams.
And pay for their living costs on the island.
They
as well,
also are extending their
A lot more we could have talked about, Charlie. We've been beaten by the clock, and Kwasi Kwarteng is waiting to come in here and talk to us. Here's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Unseasonably wet and windy weather hitting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland this morning. Further south, things are turning cooler. Still pretty warm across East Anglia and the southeast, but far from warm in the northwest. Gusty, blustery conditions for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Quite a bit of rain coming in here as well. Grey start over the Midlands and southern England, but it will brighten up here as we go through the day. A few showers possible for Wales and developing across northern England also. Temperature-wise, well, still up into the mid-20s across East Anglia and the southeast before things turn fresher. Elsewhere, temperatures are down compared to yesterday's, and certainly it feels a lot cooler with this very wet and windy weather across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Not a day to be in the Highlands of Scotland. Quite blustery conditions, but largely dry across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers coming into southern Scotland, wet and windy also for Northern Ireland. Again, not great conditions here. Gusty winds and rain on and off throughout the afternoon. A few showers will get into northwest England, the odd one for Wales, but much of the south of England, the Midlands and East Anglia will be dry once that cloud from that weather front, which is introducing the cooler air, clears away. It stays pretty blustery and wet through the evening and overnight across Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Bit of a breeze blowing further south and a much more comfortable night as well. Much less humid tonight compared to the night just gone, as temperatures dip down to 12 to 13 degrees Celsius. So a fresher feel for Friday, and generally a fine day across the south. Still pretty gusty across Scotland, still plenty more showers to come across the north and the west. A few showers for Northern Ireland, but generally a drier day here, and the winds will be easing tomorrow too. Breezy across northern England with a few showers zipping through, but the bulk of England and Wales looking dry. There'll be some sunny spells instead of the heat. Temperatures much closer to average for the time of year. Bye for now.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 27th of June, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning to you. So Sunak came out swinging last night. The Prime Minister and the Labour leader had their final feisty TV debate. But audience member Robert Blackstock stole the show with this question.
Are you two really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country?
Speaking for lots of people, wasn't he? Junior doctors are on strike again for 5 days in England over their 35% pay rise. Very dangerous. We're going to talk to a junior doctor about it. I think it's wicked.
And Sir Keir Starmer has distanced himself from David Tennant after he told Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch to shut up. Is Tennant an actor or an activist, in your opinion? Is he allowed to be?
And is this the true cost of net zero? In a leaked recording, Labour's Darren Jones, he will be Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said the original £28 billion to go green was a drop in the ocean. It will actually be hundreds of billions of pounds. And we talked to Jeff Hoon about that, and he came out with a party line, didn't he? But actually, why don't they level with us? If they're going to rush us into net zero by 2030 or 2050, level with us how much it's going to cost.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbnews.com/your say. First, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much. Good morning. The top stories. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer returned to the campaign trail today after they clashed over illegal immigration and the betting row in a television debate last night, with just a week before voters go to the polls. The Labour leader accused the Prime Minister of being bullied into taking action in the betting scandal, while Mr Sunak repeatedly warned voters not to surrender to Labour's tax and migration plans. The pair also answered questions from an invited studio audience, with one asking how either leader was planning to control illegal immigration.
The Rwandan plan is a deterrent. You just have to listen to what the illegal migrants themselves are saying. One of them just said, most of us are still in France due to the fear we have about Rwanda. Another one said, I won't cross the channel until the Rwanda plan is destroyed. If Labour win, the people smugglers are going to need a bigger boat. Don't surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
Record numbers coming across the channel, and he says it's a deterrent. There are a few hundred that would go on a flight to Rwanda at huge expense to the taxpayer. There are tens of thousands, 50,000 people have come since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister.
Police are to take the lead in investigations into some of the allegations about bets placed by politicians on the general election. Sir Philip Davies has become the latest Tory candidate to be accused of gambling on the election. He reportedly bet £8,000 against himself, holding his seat. That's according to The Times. But there's no suggestion he's done anything illegal. At least 5 Conservatives are being investigated by the Gambling Commission as part of its inquiry into bets on the timing of the July 4th poll. Labour has also been dragged into the row, suspending one candidate after he was investigated by the regulator for betting on himself to lose his seat. Now, a man understood to be a member of the Labour Party who was arrested in connection with the so-called Westminster honey trap scandal has been released on bail. The Met Police says the arrest relates to an investigation being carried out by its parliamentary liaison and investigation team following reports of unsolicited messages sent to MPs and others. In other news, junior doctors in England are walking off the job for an 11th time in almost a year. Medics are warning that more strike action could take place in the summer if the next government doesn't move forward negotiations in a timely manner. Medics are walking out for 5 days this time in their long-running dispute over pay. Junior doctors want a 35% pay increase. The British Medical Association has said it's ready to talk, and the union has already had some discussions with the Labour Party, it says. The British Medical Association insists their junior members are historically underpaid.
Our pay at the moment for a doctor in their first year is £15.50. We're asking for that to be £21. £21 an hour for a doctor that's starting life-saving treatment on our loved ones. £21 an hour for a doctor with student loans of £100,000. And because the pay cut has been so strong, we're losing doctors. We don't have enough. And when we don't have enough doctors, we're seeing patients die needlessly in the NHS every single week.
The Labour Party is pledging to turbocharge careers advice and work experience in schools, they say, to combat skill shortages in the workplace. As part of the party's plans to partner with businesses across the country, Labour has committed to delivering 2 weeks' worth of quality work experience for every young person and recruit more than 1,000 new careers advisors. The party says it would build partnerships between schools, colleges and local employers to equip young people with work-ready skills. Labour analysis estimates 1 million children are at risk of receiving inadequate information about the jobs. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News the plans would facilitate a revolution in the work readiness, but she says working people will not be taxed more as a result.
We want to grow our economy. We want to make sure we are a strong country for wealth creation, and nothing in our manifesto requires any additional taxes beyond those that we've set out, for example, ending the tax breaks that private schools enjoy. And it's why growing our economy is so central to the mission that Labour and Rachel Reeves have set out, because we know we've got to get out of this doom cycle of low growth and high taxation. We've got to get our economy moving once more and use that as an opportunity to create jobs right across our country.
And there have been reports today that missing British teenager Jay Slater has been seen watching the Euros football as the search for him continues. The probe has been thrown into further confusion as the Tenerife mayor says Spanish police are examining CCTV footage and suggests several witnesses claim to have seen him watching the football. The 19-year-old has been missing now for 11 days. Yesterday, Spanish police searched a mountainous area by helicopter, with sniffer dogs also being used on the ground. Jay had gone on holiday for his first time without his parents. And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
11:07, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, live across the United Kingdom with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
So we've got in the studio Kwasi Kwarteng, former Chancellor Exchequer, worked for a few weeks anyway, and Sam Fowles, who is one of our favourite barristers.
Hi there.
Betting. Sure. This is an issue that's really cut through, Kwasi, on the doorstep, without a doubt.
Definitely.
It's a problem particularly for the Tories.
Yep.
And we've even heard about one candidate today who's bet £8,000 on himself to lose. Extraordinary.
Philip Davis.
Yeah, so I think we're confusing a lot of things.
Yeah.
The principal issue about the election date is the suspicion that people knew what the result, what when it was. They were in a privileged inside circle, and they put money on that, and that's effectively cheating. Yeah, because they know something that the rest of the public don't know. Generally, in political betting, you're not privileged. I mean, I remember betting, I think, on Yvette Cooper to win the Labour leadership.
Oh, well, that went well.
Well, it didn't actually. Yeah, it was only like a fiver or a tenner. But I think that sort of betting, where you're not using privileged information, you're just the same as any other regular sort of betting gambler, punter. I think that's fine. There's nothing illegal about that.
So what about Alistair Jack, the Scottish secretary, who apparently joked to the BBC he'd put a bet on the election time, and then said he didn't, and then said, well, actually, he put on several bets, but they weren't. The bets weren't placed during the time in May when he was not privileged. He had no privileged information.
Yeah, I think
is that acceptable?
The key thing is to distinguish between inside information. Yeah. And when you look at the actual bets placed on the date, they shot up the day before he announced the date. Yeah. So clearly something was going on, and that's wrong and illegal. But if you're making an educated guess as to when the election might be 3 months out or 4 months out, I didn't really see the problem with that.
See, I quite like Philip Davis's response, sorry, because Philip Davis said it's got nothing to do with anybody if I put a bet on privately behind, and I'm with him on that. I think he's absolutely right. And he's put the bet on that he will lose his seat.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you're involved as a... So when I bet on the Labour leadership, I had no dog in the fight.
Correct,
That was just my assessment of where things were. Got it completely wrong. But I think there might be a question if you're a candidate.
Yeah.
Because people might say, well, you deliberately chucked it.
Maybe. But
he wouldn't.
Yeah, it's difficult to see how you could do that.
He wouldn't deliberately.
No, and I think, but there's been a healthy tradition of political betting in this country, for centuries.
Yeah.
And, we can have a debate as to whether that's right or wrong, but it's just been there. I mean, in America, they banned political betting.
Yeah.
And so all the Americans use our websites to bet on their own politics.
Well, that works.
But I think the big distinction is between having inside information, which is privileged information.
Well, let's bring the lawyer in. Sam, as a lawyer, I mean, it would be also quite hard to police because, OK, if you've got privileged information, of course it's right, you shouldn't do it, but you could always just get your mate to put the bet on.
Yeah, I mean, we do police it, though. We police it in respect of sports, for example. We police it in respect of all the massive array of things that you can bet on. And so it's clearly possible to identify if someone's doing something dodgy. So I agree with Kwasi in that sense. Where I disagree is that the sort of general, it's OK if you don't have any inside information. I agree it's legal, but as a voter, as someone who's not in politics, one of the real problems I have with our political class is they seem to think politics is a game. And you've got a political class that is very good and very expert at winning the political game, and, as we've discovered, not very expert at actually governing a country. So as a voter, I don't want to see people that are running for office betting on things. I don't want to see them treating it like a game. I want to see them taking it a bit more seriously, to be honest.
That's quite a good point, actually.
Look, I think we can be very puritanical about this.
Yeah.
I mean, someone who is an MP putting a tenner on a leadership race in another party.
What if it's 100?
What if it's £8,000?
Whatever the amount is, I don't think that's wrong. I mean, you might say, OK, he shouldn't be gambling, but I don't see how that's a moral indictment.
So,
I mean, I think we're getting very, very, very puritanical.
But doesn't it become a little bit like a Premier League footballer putting a bet on, because you mentioned sport, Sam, putting a bet on that their team's going to lose?
That's different because they're in the team and they've got an interest. So the outcome they're involved in. Yeah, but if you're betting on something external, where you don't have privileged information, where you don't have any influence, I don't see the problem with that.
But if you're a candidate who puts a lot of money on the fact you're going to lose your own election, they will what of the suspicion that
so I agree with you. I think that's different. So,
right.
so the issue I was talking about is somebody in politics, might be an MP, betting on something where they don't have privileged information and they don't know anything more than anyone else. Now, you can say they're compromising it because they should have higher thoughts and higher... But, we're part of a gambling culture. Something like half of adults, take a flutter. And if it's something that
half of adults aren't trying to run the country, are they?
No, but I don't... Look, I mean... Some MP taking a bet on what's going to happen in a general election remotely in the future, that's not impacting their ability to run the country.
Can I just say on Philip Davis too, because I've known Philip Davis a long time, he is working every hour God sends to try and win his seat, and he's got a really good team up there working.
Of course he wants to win.
And of course he wants to win.
Also,
I think it's a private thing. I think it's I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's more problematic if you're betting on yourself or against yourself. I think, broadly, to say that MPs and politicians cannot place bets on politics is crazy.
You're a Puritan.
I think that's a total infringement.
I'm not saying they cannot. I'm not saying ban it. I'm just saying, as a voter...
Sounded like you were.
You're going to lose my vote. As a voter, you're going to lose my vote. Because I just want you to... For the whole country wants to see politicians take this a bit more seriously. They want to see that the decisions they're making are impacting on people's real lives. lives and impoverishing people. So when politicians are going, oh, I just have a flutter on this, I just have a flutter on that, let's see who wins the game, then
but you see, this is the problem
the rest of the public isn't asking people to trust them with their votes. You're not asking people to trust you to distribute trillions of pounds in public money. So it's absolutely not the same that we should not have people who are playing games at the top.
Look, so you know, this is the thing I always found when I was an MP. People forget that MPs are actually people. Okay. Yeah. They're embedded in the community. They do the things that normal people do. And so if an MP is taking a view on what might happen in a political context and placing a bet on that, that's not impinging their ability to run the country.
The other thing, I was discussing this with Jeff Hoon earlier. We were off air, but I don't think he would mind me revealing this. And he was saying that actually it can be very difficult for MPs when they lose their seat to get a job.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for someone like Philip Davis, if he is going to lose his seat and he's put £8,000 on and he gets some decent odds, that might win him earnings that would sustain him for 6 months while he finds a job.
You know, he could have put the blooming bet on a year ago.
Yeah. Does that not make you sympathetic, Sam?
No, not really. I think
I get it.
If you're good enough, you'll get a job.
And also, to be honest, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But I also think £8,000 is a lot of money. I mean, generally, most of the bets that I made one or two, I think, on politics.
I'm not even sure we know if that 8,000 figure's right, actually. It's just been reported.
It's a lot of money. I mean, generally, people might put a fiver or a tenner or 20 quid, in the way that normal people do.
Let's talk more macro about the state of the Tory party. Polls are terrible, even though he did pretty well last night.
I thought he did brilliantly.
Yeah. It's your fault, isn't it? Because of the trust...
They always go on about that, but if I look back at what's at the campaign...
The trust...
Yeah, true, and that was... and I take some responsibility, but I don't take responsibility for the rise of reform, which when I checked, actually, when I left office, they were on 5%. They're now on about 17%, 15%. So they've trebled, at least. I don't take responsibility for the campaign, which has been woeful, which has been poor, as people say. I don't take a responsibility for a lot of the decisions he's made. I mean, even Philip Hammond, who I used to work with as a friend,
the former Chancellor,
he backed Sunak, and he said, "Why are we having an election now?" So the timing of the election, he can't blame other people on the timing. You know, he chose the timing and the issues on which to fight this election.
Why do you think he went with the summer? Sorry.
So I think this is one of the questions that will be debated for decades.
What's your theory?
I think there can only be two, I think, rational reasons. One is that he thought the economic data wasn't going to get better. Because otherwise, if you thought it was going to get better, why wouldn't you bet that in? Why wouldn't you wait for an interest rate cut, which he didn't do?
Yeah.
And the second reason, I think, is a more personal reason. I personally think he just had enough. And, you know, the party was warring. He thought it's not going to get much better. Let's bring it on. But people will debate that.
Further confirming Sam Fowles' suspicion that politicians are motivated for the wrong reasons. If he's just had enough, is that a good enough reason to call an election in the summer?
Yeah, well, it's certainly not a good enough reason to run for election in the first place. Like,
I don't know. Look,
I want to be the Prime Minister, and after 2 years, I'm going to get a bit bored, so I'm going to quit.
So it's a mixture of things.
How are these people asking us to vote for them?
Yeah, but there's a lot of pomposity. I mean, look, as I say, they're people. He's got to make calculated judgments. And he's probably thinking things won't get much better. You know, the party is in a difficult place. One of the reasons they gave was that somehow reform would be wrong-footed. I mean, that's been a disaster.
Because if they'd waited till November, Farage would be in America with Trump.
That's possibly true. But there are always different factors, and he's made the decision, right, we're going to surprise people and we're going to go for the election. The problem was that I think the Conservative Party was more surprised than the others.
I'm furious.
Yeah, I mean, we had, even in my seat, we didn't even have a candidate when he declared the election.
Sunak has said that if he does retain his seat but steps down as leader, he would stay in that position for the term. Do you believe him?
I do, but then I think, I mean, I know politics, so what else is he going to say? I mean, if he says...
You mean he's lying?
No, but if you're asked, will you stay the course, he's not going to say, no, I'm going to jump on the next flight, I'm out.
So he's lying?
I'm not saying he's lying, because I'm not saying he's doing that, but I'm just saying that's the only possible answer he can give in the campaign.
Sam?
Well, I was very suspicious of that, and I hope I'm proved wrong, you know, because I want Rishi Sunak to turn out to be a really good guy.
Correct, me too.
I really want that. But I'm sceptical. I mean, he's not got a good track record of telling the truth, according to Full Fact. And if I can certainly see he'd have a really strong motivation to get on the first flight to California.
What is he meant to say?
I think he'll do the full term.
Well, let me tell you, if that's true, if that's true, then he's an absolute failure to communicate that side of his character, because there are many people, the authentic wannabe politician, because the image that so many people have is that he's a technocrat waiting for him to play.
So I know Rishi. I didn't agree with him on everything. The things I disagreed with him, and I didn't back him. But I think he's a pretty straightforward guy. I think he's honest. I think he's highly intelligent. But he's like everyone else. He's making calculations. He has to. He's
built his entire campaign around misleading the public.
No.
He's built his entire campaign around this £2,000 claim, which, A, it was the civil service explicitly said, don't say this is from civil servants, and B, whether you agree it's going to be, Labour is going to increase by 2,000 or whatever, the fact every economist is saying there is a massive financial black hole that both sides are going to have to deal with. And he is refusing to deal with that for the public.
So I think your latter point is broadly right, and in a way I was sort of trying to do this myself. The only way you're going to pay for things is by growing the economy. So if they fail, either side, whoever's in, if they fail to do that, they're going to have to raise the money from somewhere, and that's what the economists are saying.
And they're predicating their growth plans on reforming the planning system. Good luck with that.
Let's see.
Right, Sam Fowles, Kwasi Kwarteng, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Up next, find out how the Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, plans to reduce the amount of migrants housed in hotels. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tory.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
We've been talking about the White House is concerned with playing down concerns about the health of President Biden, who's apparently taken to freezing during public events. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was seen herding the president back into a photo with world leaders after he shuffled aimlessly away from the group. In the last few days, videos and images of the president freezing at a fundraising event went viral, but the White House stated that they were deceptively edited cheap fakes. With me now, again, is my panel, the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop and the associate comment editor of The Telegraph, Mutaz Ahmed. Mutaz, I mean, you are a journalist. What about this idea that in some way the images could be fake?
They could be fake, and some of them will be fake, but the reason these AI images or AI videos or weirdly edited videos are a problem for the White House is that people have seen enough of Biden freezing in real life.
It's not going away, this one. It's perception versus reality, but as Mustafa said, it doesn't matter because it's now become Biden's reality, which is bushfighting these questions about his ability connected to his age. I don't understand where you go from here. He's got a vice president who isn't presidential material, who I think polls worse than he does, despite these, you would call them ageist. In many ways, it's about his competence, isn't it?
It can make a big difference when the president whose competence, mental competence, is under question, is running on the matter of competence itself. They're trying to paint Trump as being incompetent, as being not presidential, as being unable to lead, while they have a candidate who struggles to get off the stage. Yeah. That's the issue for them. And it's not really about age. He's not much older than Trump, as you say. It's about the appearance of age.
GB News, the People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Very good morning, 11:23. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
In the studio, the panel is back. Stephen Pound and his old sparring partner, Emma Webb. We've missed you, Emma.
I've missed you.
Partner?
Yes. Well, yeah, we do. That's all right.
I kneel at her feet.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about this latest polling? Who is going to be happy when in a week's time we stop talking about polling? Emma, what is the latest showing?
There's been too many polls.
Well, I mean, this would be devastating for the Conservatives because the latest polling is showing that the Lib Dems could become the new opposition. Imagine that. A Labour government with a Lib Dem opposition, exactly what the country wants.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we've seen many polls that have been predicting...
This is a poll in the Mirror, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so, I mean, plenty of polls have been predicting apocalyptic results, and it's probably not exactly accurate because who really knows? Reform predicted to win 18 seats.
Which is the most that anyone's predicted.
But there was another poll that predicted that they wouldn't win any.
Oh, really?
But that poll didn't take into account the fame factor of, you know, Nigel Farage or Richard Tice being more known amongst the public. I mean, it seems if you're trying to square all of these polls together, it seems very likely Reform are going to get a couple of seats. But this is really, really terrible. Especially
what a
given
nightmare! Can you imagine Ed Davey as leader of the opposition, probably wearing a clown costume, coming up and going beep beep beep? You know, it's just absolutely terrifying. But
and he would be facing off against Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions every week.
Also, I mean, just look at Ed Davey's performance in that question time debate discussion.
Did you think he was poor?
I think he was profoundly mediocre and he looked like he wasn't fit to be there. And I know that that's also the case for all of the other leaders.
Do you know?
But he particularly, I think he just came across as a complete sort of like wet.
But the place to be on election night is going to be Essex, isn't it?
But let me just say, what has helped Liberal Democrats enormously is Daisy Cooper.
Yeah, the deputy leader.
Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader. She's been superb on those debates. And if you're looking as a woman, you might be thinking, well, these men have made a mess of it, I'm going to vote for a woman. She's very convincing.
Well, let me tell you a little bit of that background with Daisy Cooper. I mean, I can be very careful about mentioning the seats, but
Please don't.
The seat that she won last time was a very strong Conservative seat, and she worked that, and she actually defenestrated a very strong Conservative MP to win that seat and make it very, very solid. She is a very, very tough campaigner, and she only came in 2019, and she's absolutely rocketed up and risen through the ranks. I mean, she is an interesting one.
And when Ed Davey was in big political trouble over the post office, because he
didn't call for Layla Moran, which is what he used to do.
Yeah, but some Tory MPs said to me, don't kick him too hard, because they feared that Davey might be ousted and would be replaced by Daisy Cooper, who they feared much more.
I was thinking, I mean, Ed Davey and I both shared a vice when we were both elected. We both got elected in
I hope it's a respectable vice.
We were desperately heavy smokers.
Right.
And we basically used to sort of meet, in effect, behind the bike sheds at the end of the terrace, behind the speakers, and surreptitiously puffing away on our silk cut. And, you know, there's something about that sort of sin that binds a chap.
Who are the people voting for who think they will vote for Reform, Emma?
People of my age.
Who is that person? This because I was thinking about this, because they are traditionally more of a sort of maybe an older vintage, maybe conservative.
I would say
more likely to
people
vote.
in working class areas that voted for the Conservatives in 2019.
Yeah, behind the red wall.
So, for example, my home constituency is Hornchurch and Upminster. The polling is looking as if it is extremely split between sorry, I've mentioned...
Did you hear Stephen groan?
Don't worry, we can deal with that.
We can deal with it.
The polling is it's very difficult to talk about it without mentioning it. The polling is very split, and the reason why I'm using this as an example is because it's a very, very safe Conservative seat, but it's also one of the highest Brexit voting seats in the country and also within London, and so Reform, being the heirs of the Brexit Party, will have a good reputation there. And it may be the case that people in areas like that end up with a Labour MP just simply because the vote has been so split between a very, very safe Conservative candidate and the Reform vote. So I think my point is that the people who will be voting for reform will likely be people who couldn't in a million years vote for the Labour Party, who are definitely not going to vote for the Lib Dems, but feel that it would be unconscionable to vote for the Conservatives after they had been betrayed from that 2019 vote, because many of those people lent their vote to the Conservatives for the first time. So it's not just people, I think, of an older generation or people like me who identify as a boomer. It's people in those areas, those heartlands, the common sense working people, to use a horrible turn of phrase. Everyone's really.
But Emma, the reality is that most of the reform voters I've spoken to have an absolute loathing and a contempt for the whole political machine at the present time. It is a howling of fury and anger at the way in which they feel let down by venal, corrupt politicians.
And there will also be
and it's not necessarily
votes.
It's not left or right. It's nowhere on that political spectrum. It is absolute fury at the way that politicians have let the country down, and they feel that they've let them down.
Stephen, I don't think this campaign will have done much to change that view. Because
I wish I could disagree with you, Andrew.
Are being completely dishonest about the financial challenges this country faces.
But you know why.
Yeah.
We just look at the Labour Party getting itself in knots over how much net zero is going to cost. And now they're saying it will come from private investment. Well,
they didn't tell us that before.
Good luck with that once you've...
But Emma, why should we have to find out that actually Labour think it's going to cost hundreds of billions in a leaked tape recording of a member of the shadow cabinet? They should be telling us this up front.
This is something that if it's going to form part of their significant policy at taxpayers' expense, it's something that needs to be at the forefront of the campaign, regardless of whether or not you think it's going to play well with the public, because it's just cynical. As you even saw Keir Starmer almost admitting to, when he was making those comments about supporting Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto, practically admitting to the fact that he will say anything in order to get elected. So I think that what's interesting about this general election campaign is that it's almost become more presidential. We're focusing a lot more on the leadership rather than the parties. And if we vote for Keir Starmer, we vote for the Labour Party, we're not getting Keir Starmer. We might be getting Wes Streeting. We could be getting Angela Rayner. We don't know. And the Conservative Party is a perfect example of how many people you might go.
That applies to every single political party. I have to say...
Of course, but what I'm saying is it means that you should focus on the policies rather than getting caught up with
I agree, and I think Wes Streeting's a very good example. I think he's one of the most original political thinkers we've had since Anthony Crossland. I think he's a really, really interesting... He's thinking the unthinkable, particularly in the case of the National Health Service. Andrew's point earlier on about probity in politics and talking about the realities of the financial position. Listen to Wes Streeting talking about the NHS, and then you'll actually see there's some original thinking going on.
He will not be able to do half of what he says he'd like to do.
If he does half of it, I'll be relieved.
Because the unions won't let him, Labour MPs won't let him. But going back to this ticking time bomb about the cost of net zero, is that why we haven't seen Ed Miliband in this campaign at all?
Well, Ed Miliband has
Who's got the climate change with... No, he hasn't.
I mean, the tape recording that you're talking about was a suggestion for a first draft of the manifesto 18 months ago. It's only just come out now.
You think the cost of decarbonisation has dropped since then?
Well, sadly, I suspect it's gone in the other direction, to be perfectly honest, But, I mean, if Carla Denyer from, from the Green person was here, she would actually be saying, look, we can't afford not to do it because the economic consequences are so horrendous.
Well, she obviously can't afford to have a proper heat pump in she's still got a conventional gas boiler.
But she's thinking seriously about it.
She's a fraud.
And let me just say, there is some way in which you can actually have your cake and eat it, because you can convert from our
typical socialist.
we want a bigger cake.
There it is.
It's someone else's cake.
In one.
Hang on a sec. If you want to move away from...
Have your cake and eat it.
If you want to move away from fossil fuel dependency into net zero...
Your political epitaph, you can have your cake and eat it if you vote for
We've been beaten by the clock.
You can work in net
Thank you, Stephen. You've been found out.
Don't go anywhere. Here's Tatiana Sanchez with the news.
Bev, thank you. The top stories this hour. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer returned to the campaign trail today after they clashed over illegal immigration and the betting row in a TV debate last night, with just a week before voters go to the polls. The Labour leader accused the Prime Minister of being bullied into taking action in the betting scandal, while Mr Sunak repeatedly warned voters not to surrender to Labour's tax and migration plans. The pair also answered questions from a studio audience, with one asking how they're each planning to control illegal immigration.
The Rwandan plan is a deterrent. You just have to listen to what the illegal migrants themselves are saying. One of them just said, most of us are still in France due to the fear we have about Rwanda. Another one said, I won't cross the channel until the Rwanda plan is destroyed. If Labour win, the people smugglers are going to need a bigger boat. Don't surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
Record numbers coming across the channel. And he says it's a deterrent. There are a few hundred that would go on a flight to Rwanda at huge expense to the taxpayer. There are tens of thousands. 50,000 people have come since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister.
Police are to take the lead in investigations into some of the allegations about bets placed by politicians on the general election. Sir Philip Davies has become the latest Tory candidate to be accused of gambling on the election. He reportedly bet £8,000 against himself holding his seat, according to The Sun. But there is no suggestion he's done anything illegal. At least 5 Conservatives are being investigated by the Gambling Commission as part of its inquiry into bets on the timing of the July 4th poll. Labour has also been dragged into the row, suspending one candidate after he was investigated by the regulator for betting on himself to lose his seat. Junior doctors in England are walking off the job for an 11th time in almost a year. Medics are warning that more strike action could take place in the summer if the next government doesn't move negotiations forwards in a timely manner. Junior doctors are walking out for 5 days this time in their long-running dispute over pay. They want a 35% pay rise. The British Medical Association says it's ready to talk, and the union has already had some discussions with the Labour Party, it says. And the mother of a British teenager who went missing in Tenerife says some of the money raised by a crowdfunding appeal will be withdrawn to help with the search for her son. The appeal has so far raised more than £36,000. Jay's mother, Debbie Duncan, has thanked the public for their support, kind messages and good wishes. Jay has now been missing for 11 days. Yesterday, Spanish police searched a mountainous area by helicopter, with sniffer dogs also being used on the ground. He'd gone on holiday for the first time without his parents. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
€1.1827. The price of gold is £1,830 and 9 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,210 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Now, we have to give you the full list of those candidates who've declared in Hornchurch and Upminster, thanks to Emma Webb. So, here we go. Labour Party, Sonny Bra. Conservative Party, Julia Lopez. The Reform Party, Nicholas Palmer. The Green Party, Melanie Collins. Independent candidate is David Warren Durant. And Ian Sanderson for the Liberal Democrats. Now, I'm the only one not giggling. Everybody else here is getting a little bit amused about this.
I don't know what you mean.
Tom Harwood,
I don't know what on earth could have incited any sort of giggling from you, Mr. Andrew Pearce.
It is the worst thing when you get the giggles on air. They just won't go away. We set each other off sometimes.
No, all of those candidates very, very sensible. Now, we've got a show coming up at midday.
We do.
And it's going to be stuffed full of live events. We're going to be hearing not only from Nigel Farage, who's going to be speaking around midday.
In
yet
Durham.
Another... and this is, I think, his first pit stop in the northeast in this campaign trail. So it'll be interesting what he has to say, but plenty more besides.
Labour Heartland territory.
Yes, very much so.
It'll be very interesting to see if he has a massive crowd, as he's become accustomed to.
Sure he will.
Rishi Sunak, as well, he's having a bit of a Q&A with members of the public, so we'll see how that goes down. I imagine he'll have a slight spring in his step, maybe after the debate last night. He did do well. He pointed out some vagaries, let's say, in his policies.
The line about negotiating with the mullahs.
I know, that was good. That was good. That was good. What else? We're also going to be speaking to Lord Joe Johnson.
Yes.
Boris'
brother of Boris Johnson. So perhaps we'll ask... We won't focus entirely on his brother, but we will ask Where on earth is he?
Where is he?
Where on earth is he? A second holiday?
isn't he?
A second holiday this summer? I mean, is he trying to deliberately steer as far away from a sinking ship as possible?
Yes.
Only to swoop in, perhaps, mid of the next Parliament? Or is something else going... Well, we'll be asking those questions. And also, there's a bit of royal magic sprinkled throughout the show, some live event that we'll be going to, too.
Very good. How's Princess Anne doing? She's still in hospital, isn't she?
Still in hospital. Yeah, and it did seem that initially the words from the King's communique were, we wish for a speedy recovery. And then we heard from her husband just yesterday that she's making steady progress, but it's a slow recovery.
The trouble with a head injury is you don't know in the immediate aftermath how bad it is, because if there's a brain bleed, then it could be actually days and days, and they have to monitor that situation very carefully.
And there's talk now about massively cancelling her diary because she's the hardest working royal by a country mile.
It's such a shame, but we may well get some updates during our airtime. And, of course, the US election, first debate this evening. Be very interesting to see how those two fare.
Will Joe Biden remember he's on parade?
Oh, well, it's going to be
a question.
very exposing for him, potentially, isn't it?
I found it extraordinary that serious commentators in the US are saying perhaps Biden gets swapped out when the convention comes along. I mean, is that a serious possibility?
I'm sure it is. Right, all that and more with Emily and Tom from Midday. Up next, have you heard of a dink? Well, they're being asked to train guide dogs. We'll explain all of that in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's very warm in the southeast this afternoon, but it is turning much cooler during the next day or so across the whole of the UK as this unseasonably deep low moves into the northwest, and that's going to bring some increasingly strong winds, gusts into the 40s miles an hour across western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Could cause some ferry disruption, some bridge closures, and it's also going to make it feel unpleasant with spiralling bands of rain reaching western Scotland and Northern Ireland, showers for northern England, parts of Wales and the southwest with a lot of cloud here and much cooler, but we keep the warmth in the southeast at least for the first few hours of the afternoon. Temperatures into the high 20s once again. Before that, cooler air sweeps across the whole of the UK, and it's certainly going to feel cool with some heavy rain clearing Shetland during the afternoon and some also persistent wet weather pushing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the winds staying brisk. And we've got one or two showers into Wales and the southwest. A lot of cloud here compared with recent days, but it stays clear across East Anglia and the southeast during the evening. And overnight we keep the clear spells here whilst bands of rain and showers push through Scotland, Northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. So a north-south contrast overnight. The winds staying strong across the country, but temperatures lower compared with recent nights, so perhaps more comfortable for sleeping in those areas where we've had the muggy air persisting. In the south, it's a fine start to Friday, some sunshine first thing, and it stays mostly dry, albeit rather cloudy, cool and breezy. Further north, we've got lots of showers pushing into North Wales, Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours, but the rain less persistent. Nevertheless, it's going to stay cool in the north, temperatures close to average in the south.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
11:42, Britain's Newsroom with GBNews, Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
Well, the NHS has warned patients to expect major disruption as a heatwave coincides with junior doctor strikes that have started this morning.
We'll talk now to NHS junior doctor who's been with us on many times on this programme, Basha Mukherjee. Morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning.
Even Wes Streeting, who's going to be Secretary of State for Health in a week's time, barring a miracle, has completely disowned this strike action.
At least Wes Streeting has suggested that there could be a possibility of reaching that 35% increase over some period of time. I just feel with the current government, the relationship has completely broken down. It's really sad for any upcoming doctors and medical students. It sends a really bad message that this government, our employers, doesn't value their employees. And no matter how much we've been speaking about this and striking, they're just not willing to come forward and take action.
What is the point of this 5-day strike before a general election when you absolutely know there's not even a slight possibility a Tory government is going to say, OK, then we'll give you your 35% or 34% or 33%. It is pure political malice. And the people who will suffer most are not your doctors, it's patients who are going to have their operations and procedures cancelled. And some people may die as a result of your action. Are you proud of that?
I would just like to clarify that I'm personally not striking.
No, your colleagues are, and you're here to defend the strike.
Yes, absolutely. And I do defend the strikes because we have to think about the NHS as not just the the outpatient service, but also the acute services. And for as long as I've worked in the NHS, there has been not a single day where we've actually met clinical staffing levels as they should be. And these are on non-strike days. And this is on wards, in the A&E, in medical, all the departments, essentially. So we're not just talking about outpatient services. If we continue down this line, we might not have an NHS. And that's what really saddens me about this whole matter. There is a really important reason why we've chosen this particular days. Yes, it is a political message because the whole issue has been turned political recently. And actually, the government was given forewarning several weeks ago that these strikes were going to happen, but they didn't take any action. So I would say they're to blame for this whole thing.
So are you effectively trying then to encourage people to vote for other parties other than the Conservatives, explicitly saying change the political landscape, even though Labour have said we cannot meet your demands?
I don't think it's about particularly any particular company or any particular party. It's about sending a message out to the politicians as well as to the public that this is the state of the NHS and this is how the current government has been dealing with it. Even running up to a week before the elections, they're not willing to come and resolve this issue. And the NHS has been a big part of the recent campaigns for both parties, really. And regardless of who comes in power, this needed to be highlighted close to the elections to show the dire situation itself. It's more a message to the public, not necessarily to support any particular party, but really to showcase the state of the NHS, the state of the workers, the state of the doctors.
I think people are well aware. Unfortunately, Basha, I think people do not need a strike to know how bad the NHS is, and people who are in pain and waiting for operations know that more than anybody, and now they're going to be waiting long. But thank you. We appreciate your input this morning. Junior Dr. Basha Mukherjee there.
I think the strike is wicked.
Right, up next, would you volunteer to train a guide dog? Well, we'll see Betty in a few minutes, and you can decide whether that would appeal to you. This is Britain's Newsroom on
That's my mum's name, Betty.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Unseasonably wet and windy weather hitting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland this morning. Further south, things are turning cooler. Still pretty warm across East Anglia and the southeast, but far from warm in the northwest. Gusty, blustery conditions for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Quite a bit of rain coming in here as well. Grey start over the Midlands and southern England, but it will brighten up here as we go through the day. A few showers possible for Wales and developing across northern England
also. Temperature-wise, well, still up into the mid-20s across East Anglia and the southeast before things turn fresher. Elsewhere, temperatures are down compared to yesterday's, and certainly it feels a lot cooler with this very wet and windy weather across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Not a day to be in the Highlands of Scotland. Quite blustery conditions, but largely dry across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers coming into southern Scotland, wet and windy also for Northern Ireland. Again, not great conditions here, gusty winds and rain on and off throughout the afternoon. A few showers will get into northwest England, the odd one for Wales, but much of the south of England, the Midlands and East Anglia will be dry once that cloud from that weather front, which is introducing the cooler air, clears away. It stays pretty blustery and wet through the evening and overnight across Northern Ireland and western Scotland. A bit of a breeze blowing further south and a much more comfortable night as well. Much less humid tonight compared to the night just gone, as temperatures dip down to 12 to 13 degrees Celsius. So a fresher feel for Friday, and generally a fine day across the south. Still pretty gusty across Scotland, still plenty more showers to come across the north and the west. A few showers for Northern Ireland, but generally a drier day here, and the winds will be easing tomorrow too. Breezy across northern England with a few showers zipping through, but the bulk of England and Wales looking dry. There'll be some sunny spells instead of the heat. Temperatures much closer to average for the time of year. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Giovanni is axed following growing allegations of threatening and abusive behaviour.
We won't see his little toes dancing around the dance floor again, which is a shame.
Was it the BBC saying, you know, we've had some bad publicity about this star, do we need to maybe let him go? Or was it Giovanni himself saying that, you know, he's had to, with all the bad publicity and what's the allegations against him, he's walked away? We don't exactly know. But what we do know is that Amanda Abingdon, who he was coupled with last year on the last series of Strictly, left claiming that she had nasty behaviour from him in rehearsals when they were training for their routines. And she's also been diagnosed with PTSD, which she is blaming or claiming happened because of the training that she was put under Giovanni. It's very sad because I've met Giovanni on quite a few occasions, and he comes across as a very nice gentleman, actually, and the fans absolutely love him. And even though the allegations are out there against him, everybody I speak to in terms of the fans are on his side.
I mean, from the fans' point of view, they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. All they see is an incredibly gifted dancer who we're seeing footage of now.
It might come out later, but there's all sorts of things coming out because after Amanda came out and claimed all this behaviour against him, a male celebrity last week also came out and voice their opinion. Yeah, a lot of fans will be gutted, but as you say, we don't know the full story yet as what's gone on.
And it's incredible pressure that no one's allowed to be, a duffer right from the start now.
I mean, it's one thing learning lines if you're an actor, but it's a different kettle of fish altogether if you're learning moves that you've never done before. So you've got...
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. So, guide dogs need you.
So the charity are actually calling on DINKs.
Now, DINKs, that is not an offensive word. It stands for Dual Income No Kids, to raise future guide dogs, as almost half of people admit to delaying parenthood in favour of owning a puppy.
So we've got in the studio with us guide dog fosterer Eugene Lynch and guide dog in training Betty. And Betty is a Labrador. She is asleep. That's the impact. That's your Bev Turner. It's on so many people, Eugene. Now, you've been fostering. This is you're on your 13th dog?
Yes.
So how long do you train them for?
They arrive to us after they've been with their puppy raiser for usually about a year. So we get them about a year old, and we have them for between 3 and 6 months for the last period of the training. So they have professional trainers at Guide Dogs. We take them to and from the office every day, and we keep them all weekend, take them for free runs in the park and that sort of thing. So Betty here is a year and 8 months old, and she's doing really well in her training. As you can see, she's very focused at the moment.
Very placid.
Yes. That's when they learn all the kind of special skills of a guide dog. So, you know, finding the curb, how to cross the road, how to go up and down stairs, finding the button box when you're crossing the road and that sort of thing as well.
And why these DINKs, Eugene, this dual income no kids? Why would they be the right kind of people to foster these dogs?
Well, I think for my partner and I, when we first started thinking about volunteering with guide dogs, we always wanted to have a dog, and we thought, because we're both working, the dog might be home for long hours. We'd have to either get a dog walker or some kind of daycare. We didn't think it would be fair on a dog for us to have a dog. And then we saw this opportunity and we thought, well, this is the perfect solution, because the dog's busy all day and lots of people paying attention to her in the office. And, you know, we're working full time. We have her basically in the evenings and at the weekends. So it's a really good way of both volunteering with a charity that does so much for people, and also then looking after a dog at home.
But I'd have a problem with this, Eugene, because I've got a soft spot for dogs. You must become incredibly attached to them, because how long are they with you for?
They're with us usually for between 3 and 6 months.
Well, that's a long time.
We did have one dog during COVID, and because of all the lockdowns, we had her for 15 months.
So then you have to give her up?
Yes. So we've done that now 13 times.
How do you cope with that? Because that might deter people watching, thinking, I'm going to get really close to this.
I think you have to go into it with your eyes open. So as much as the first time you do it, you think, well, I'm not going to get too attached and it's going to be okay. Your heart does break every time, I'm going to be honest.
That's it.
It is a little bit heartbreaking every time, but it's bittersweet because you know that dog is going on to change somebody's life and they're going to have a fantastic life. They're very motivated and happy to do their job, and so you're kind of helping to prepare them for that.
Are you allowed to keep in touch with what's happened to the dog and get sent regular photos? We
sometimes get updates. It will depend on who the new owner is and that sort of thing, but sometimes they will let the trainers know, you know, how the dog is doing or send a photo or something like that, and we get to know from that as well.
And how important is it that the charity gets more people like you to to foster these dogs? Because is there a shortage?
Yes, partly because of COVID. You know, there was a real slowdown in the number of new dogs that were coming through the programme. So there's a big waiting list now of people who need a guide dog. There are a lot of guide dogs retiring as well, because, you know, guide dogs can only work for a certain amount of time. So there were lots of people on the waiting list. They've been waiting for years for a new dog. So they're trying to get as many dogs through the programme as possible. And to do that, they need more puppy raisers and they need more fosterers like my partner and me.
And do most of the dogs you've had, have they gone on to be successful guide dogs?
Yes, I mean, they don't. You know, a percentage of them make the cut. Basically, not all guide dogs or not all guide dogs are destined to be really great guide dogs. So the first dog that we had already been withdrawn from the program when we got him. So we only had him for a few weeks, and they knew he was going to be rehomed as a pet. That happens sometimes, but plenty of them do make it. And the ones that do, they just do such an amazing job. They're incredibly well trained. They're really happy to do that job as well, and to be a volunteer who has a small part in making that happen.
She's so happy that she's literally so relaxed. She's fallen asleep here.
Very relaxed.
Do you let them in the bedroom?
There are a lot of rules about that sort of thing. So at home, you can't allow them on the couch, you can't allow them on the bed and that sort of thing. It's up to the guide dog owner who eventually gets the dog whether they decide to allow them. But if you start doing that when they're young, they won't stop doing that. So we have to be very careful about it.
We're tight on time. How do people want to do this? How do they get in touch? Who do they get in touch with?
Easiest way to do it is go on the Guide Dogs website or search Guide Dogs Fosterer, and it will come straight up. You can get in touch with Guide Dogs. They will have a conversation. A lot of people like us might think, well, that's not suitable for where we live or anything like that. Normally, that's not a problem.
Okay, well, I'm sure our viewers will be keen to do that. Eugene, thank you so much. Thank you, Betty, as well. We will see you on...
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232.